teachers. And people, we had teachers, and on this panel there were lots and lots of teachers, lots and lots of people connected with attorneys, number 2, and well, I can't count. You know, 2. And Sarah, you had some announcements today?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody you owe $1.50 if your child is taken care of in the center of the pod tonight. So please pay before you leave. We're trying to videotape this. The idea being that people who missed it, I know already of some parents who couldn't come and would like to be able to see it. So we'll try to be as inobtrusive as possible, but please try to speak up.
Okay.
All right?
Yes.
And if anybody has any objections, please speak now, because otherwise I'm going to be trying to get you on film. The handouts are all over there, just in case anybody missed them. I also have copies of the handout that Larry's and John's handouts for their co-oping parents. If anybody's interested in seeing them, I have copies of them over there. I don't have enough for people to take, but you can read them, or I could get you a copy if you really care. And the next orientation will be the 15th of October, Tuesday again. Unfortunately, Tuesday is the only day when everybody's schedule works out. So it'll be same time, same place, 15th October. And different topics. We'll have another part of the outline you'll get that night. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, the way we're going to do this is we have sort of a general outline that has been put together over many years. And it's been altered and adjusted, and we're going to work with what we've got right now. And then I'm feeling that I'd like to have some feedback later on, or maybe to Sarah, so that we can keep altering and adjusting our outlines and the information that we're trying to pass on. Tonight we're starting with volunteering, and it's working in the classroom. One very important part of that is to truly, truly be a part of the situation that you're in. If you are sitting in a meeting, be there, be present. Doesn't mean that you're actively talking, participating, but your attention is there, you're helping to back up. I know in my meeting, I suspect Sandy feels the same way, that if you have children around you who are kind of fussing around or whatever, it's fine to just put a hand out and pat them, you know, kind of thing.
It's the time to reach over and tell them to knock it off. Strongly.
Right. You can take or back us up. I know when Sandy and I are working together in a group, one person leads and the other person backs up. And that's what we're hoping that the parents who are in the group will do with us. When you're working around in the classroom, then, you are essentially a facilitator. And your job is, and we need you, because this is what makes this classroom work, is to be present and involved in that situation. Sometimes it's not active participation. If you're supervising or watching, facilitating, helping people do puzzles, if there are 8 puzzles out, we do not expect you to be in there mussing puzzle. We expect you to be an encourager, to, oh, well, maybe if you turn that piece that way. Look at the edges over here. Some sort of suggestions that help keep kids focused and feel successful. I think that a theme in this classroom for the adults is keep it successful. Help kids feel like they're doing a good job.
I'd like to add a piece in there too. That has to do with whether or not you're interested in what's going on in the classroom. Adults are not always interested in what children are doing. And there's nothing abnormal about that. Some of us get rather interested in it, and that's probably why we do the work we do. However, when you come in here and you volunteer, if you aren't interested, it's our hope that you will fake it, and that you will fake it in a genuine manner. And you know, that's said with humor, but I also really truly mean it. It means the world to kids when they believe that they have adults around them that are interested in hearing what they have to say, in listening to an explanation, or you know, receiving admiration for what they're doing, and it just makes such a difference in the learning atmosphere. That's a subtle part of it, but it's important at the same time.
To go along with that, on the flip side of it is, if we ask you to do something that you hate, that you genuinely dislike, it's really, really important that you let us know. Because then you can't fake it. And we've gone past that. So we need to know that, and so that you can choose, or we can ask you to do something else. That will be really helpful and beneficial for the children. Some little hints about working with little kids is get down on their level, physically, making eye contact. On here it says trust your intuition and common sense. I was talking to a substitute today, and I was saying, well, you know, we run this classroom. Now I've been in lots of classrooms this year, and our classroom is much more like, it's a classroom, but it's more like our homes than it is the traditional classroom. And so a lot of it's common sense. And if you think about what it is that kids are allowed to do in your house, or not allowed to do in your house, and what kind of verbal communication is okay and not okay, then if you just think about that, that's what works here, very much so. We do not like children standing and jumping on the tables. We do not. In my house, children are not allowed to jump on my tables, okay? It's the same kind of rules. If they go racing through, they can't go racing through here, they can't go racing through my house. It's a very kind of common sense kind of thing. The other thing that goes along with that, on the paper it says, be an active listener. If you are a part of the children and what they're doing and involved with them, you are gaining, I guess it's respect. At that point, that's when they also will listen to you. You become another adult in their life. And that part's really important. Some people get really frightened about saying, you know, it's not okay for you to do that. Well, folks, it's perfectly okay for all of us in this room to do that. That's really important.
Another part that is often a key with that is to gain eye contact. Not just when you're about to say, you know, it's not okay to jump on tables, but anything you're doing with them, gain their eye contact and engage them from that point of view. You know, it is impossible to have a conversation with someone who's looking like this or who's like this. And if it means that you go down to a chair, well, do it. It's not that hard to do, you know, if you know the children real well, it's also not impossible to put your hand on their chin, you know, and gently indicate that you want them to look at you. Most children respond really well to that if the atmosphere is warm. When you begin to engage a child and talk with them, generally we ask questions, especially of the younger ones. Try your best not to ask a question that can be answered with a yes or a no. And try really hard not to say, do you understand what I'm saying? Because they always understand what you're saying, and by and large they don't. So, you know,
Don't
try
be
real
disappointed.
hard.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I wanted to back up the common sense thing again. I don't know why, but I think all of us tend to forget about common sense and just what is okay and what isn't okay. And I know I talk to a lot of people about doing the yard duty outside and watching the children play. And it seems so important that people want to know, what are the rules? What's okay here and what isn't okay here, and how does it work? And I think that while that is important, the aspect of common sense is also important. And we are the grown-ups. We are the adults in the situation. And it's okay to tell a child not to do something and find out later that generally it's accepted. I mean, it's okay to make those kinds of mistakes. The playground rules are the same as when you and I were on the playground. They basically aren't any different. Safety is still run the same way, and generally you have to be able to see them. You know, and once you start your mind rolling along that line, it isn't too hard.
Yeah. Think school. Just think
Oh,
back
yeah.
to school. And the things that you can do at home, you can't do at school. You can't climb trees at school. You can't climb on top of things, you know, for whatever the reasons are. That's, you know, those
It
are
generally
school
doesn't
rules.
work in a group
Yeah.
form.
I tell the kids that if it were at my house, yes, you could climb my tree. You know, you could climb on top of my slide. You can't do that here. This is school.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
I know that last year was my first year, and we didn't have an orientation, so we really had to learn on the fly. And I didn't have any problem with simple stuff like don't get up on the table and jump up and down, but I didn't know what to do when I would tell a child not to do something and they would pay no attention to me, and that, you know, like I would see you send particularly active children, say, outside. After a while, I saw that you would say to that child, go out and don't come back in until you're ready to
Right.
behave. And it was the next step that I would usually go to you because I didn't know
Right.
what the next step should be if the child is still, you know,
Mhm.
stuck to the ceiling. Is that the best thing, to just come to you guys, or try it,
Generally,
unless it's an obvious? I mean, the thing is, I know when I interact with other parents
Mhm.
and I watch how they discipline, a lot of times it's not the way I would handle things.
right. We are
We're all
all
different.
quite
Yeah,
different.
so, but you guys do have, within a range, sort of standard
If you-
operating.
You know, I think it's safe to say if you are observing or working with a child and it is not working for that child, you have tried a couple of ideas and flat out there is no acceptance, it is not working.
Then you get
My strong intuition says to me that's time for you to say, Sandy, you know, over
Yeah.
here,
appropriate vote.
because if you make the move that I make, which is to send them out, it just might be that quite by accident, you send the one out that we can't do that with,
Right.
you know.
For whatever reason.
For whatever
I
the
don't know.
reason. And that's generally what those of us who are
Yeah.
here every day have.
Right.
So if it isn't working, just come over and say to us, you know.
Well, so
what do
is
I
it,
do?
you
is it
need
that
to
you
know-
know what works with certain
Yes.
kids?
What you
Just like-
need to know that because we are all individuals, and the children are all individuals, and even though we have sort of a set pattern that we may use, and it sounds the same for each child, it's not. Everyone has their uniqueness, and we develop a uniqueness in dealing with that child. And so, when it comes to these hard spots, then absolutely I agree that then you get the appropriate, teacher to do that. It is okay to say to a child, though, in a situation, if you have said, whatever it is, I need you to sit down on the floor now with a book or whatever, and no one's listening, it's fine to go up and say, hi there, look at my face, I said, and tell them, and see what happens. That works really well, or it may work really well. It's worth trying. And then if you have no response, then yes, indeed, you need to have one of us.
A couple of, one other angle is that if you are discovering that either you don't like the way the children are relating to you in the classroom, or what you are saying is not being particularly successful, talk to us. Because we're happy to talk about different techniques and ideas and ways that you can change what you are saying. Often if you just shift what you are saying, a child can understand it, whereas they couldn't. Or your demeanor becomes one of empowered as opposed to willy-nilly. So if things aren't working for you and we're not noticing it, say something to us about it. I also wondered if anyone had questions or comments they wanted to make right now about difficult places that they've discovered for themselves already.
I was going to say that we could have like about 3 or 4 minutes of questions, answers, and that sort of stuff before we have to sort of move on to the list.
Would anyone like to
I have
comment?
a question about when you're talking about the playground.
Can you speak up, because it's not gonna...
A question about the playground. I was working out on the playground, and I noticed there were kids up this end of the playground going up behind the big rock up there
Right.
where they were out of sight.
Right.
And I've not been here before, but I
Yeah.
assumed the rule was, let's be where
And
we
you
can
assumed
see.
correctly.
I went up there looking to get them, and luckily I did, because as I rounded the back of the big rock, a child fell from the top of the rock
Oh.
backwards and banged his head coming down. And it turned out that he was an A&E kindergartner. And I took him over there and took
Great.
care of it. But at that point, I said to everybody there, look, he got hurt, you all belong down there. And I had no
Thank you.
idea whether that was
Good
the
job.
rule, but they did move.
It is. That's
But then I mentioned it when I brought him over
Uh-huh.
to his teacher, that there were a bunch of kids there, and I didn't know the rule. And she said, well, they were all right there yesterday. So I really didn't know what the rule was.
Was that a teacher that you spoke to?
Was that last
Well,
week?
yeah, but it was a substitute, I think.
Oh.
Because he said, it's not my
Oh,
teacher. I said,
okay.
who's your
I
teacher?
know
And he
who it
said,
was, yeah.
and so I didn't know
We will get a
particularly.
message back to them, and we'll get it reiterated.
Yeah, because
that,
I wasn't quite sure
yeah.
what the rule was.
That was-
then
must
at
have been
that
last
point.
week.
Yeah,
It
that was
was.
last week.
Thanks, Marlene, for mentioning
I think the playground's the area I have the most trouble with,
the hardest.
just generally, anyway.
Uh-huh.
I hate outside duty. Put that down in your paper. That's why I teach high school, junior high, you don't have to do that. I don't like the squabbles the kids get into. I get real puzzled as to how to handle it. And you never see what they're arguing over. It's always like something that you missed. And just the rules, like when I was out there, I knew about they couldn't be behind in the
Uh-huh.
trees, but they told me they could be on the tree. So they were climbing
Wrong.
on that tree that goes over the bridge. And I didn't know, so I just kind of sitting there going, yeah. Yeah.
Ready to catch, yeah, when it
Yeah.
comes down.
So I would like kind of a more formal thing on what the playground rules are. I know they're not supposed to go down in the valley.
Are
and
they
not
listed
supposed to
anywhere?
Well, no, because they sort of change
Well, what if
along
we,
the
could we
way.
make that sort of a long-term project?
Basically speaking, we do not climb on top of, we do not go out of sight. Trees are out in any form, even the most innocent-looking ones, and if they
Not behind
demand
the
an
lunch shelter.
explanation, you tell them it's because we are a large group of people and it flat out doesn't work with a lot of people. Climb at home, not here.
Right, not behind the lunch
Not behind
shelter,
the lunch
not
shelter.
behind these buildings, in the playground area, not on the what? Yeah, the lower field, if we have enough adults, then they can ask for one of the adults to sit on the dragon, and then they can go down to the lower
How
field,
about
or
the-
go down with them.
The little trees by the parking lot, I've seen a lot of kids.
No,
No.
they are not supposed to be anywhere near that
Always a
area.
bunch of them in there when I'm going home.
Well,
Oh,
when you're
going
going
home.
home, yeah, because they wait.
Yeah, they're waiting. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Where I run into trouble is, I personally feel that most of the time, if kids are discussing something, even if it's kind of heated, you try to let them get through it on their own. You don't
Yeah.
want to jump in there every
Right,
2
yeah,
seconds with
exactly,
your,
right.
with, the great word from on high. How far do you want to let them go? Like, what's a hint that, okay, step in here
Okay.
now?
One hint is if one person's doing all the talking.
No give and take.
If there's no give and take in the talking, and no matter how many times I say it, you repeat your story back to me, it's time for intervention. Because you're not
If they're
listening.
not really listening.
Whether you're right or wrong is not the issue here. We need to listen to what each other has to say. And the power tripping is a very, very strong thing between children. A move to up the ante, either to go physical, to, if we're arguing over a ball, to pull the ball out of the game and waltz away with it.
My ball.
Anything along that line where you personally suddenly spoil it for the rest of whatever is here, that's another upping the ante move that you need to intervene on.
Yeah, there's another school rule, generally speaking, that you can't lock games. Meaning that, two people playing with a ball and a closed game is not okay. The games are open to a variety of people. If it's a 9-person game, 9 people may play. You can't lock it at 2. Sometimes this gets difficult. We haven't had, I don't think that at least
It seemed at the moment
It
we
hasn't
haven't
come
much
up,
of it.
but
It will in
that's
the
much-
spring as
yes.
the teen game mania starts to
Right,
roll
exactly.
out.
anything else? We're ready to move on to conflict resolution.
I have one
although-
more. This is a
Yeah,
good issue.
we're not, okay.
What I mean, okay, so then you see that one of the children isn't listening. What's a good, like, opening line? See, my tendency is, hey, you're not listening, and that's not helpful, and I know it, but I don't know what's good.
Okay. Before we answer that, because it's such a perfect lead into the next
I was rooting
topic,
for you guys.
does anybody else want to bring up what's difficult for them or a question? Yes.
What if you sort of unwillingly become party? If the child just starts telling you more than you really want to hear, what do you do with that information?
Give me an example so that I
Well,
can be sure I know what you're talking about.
You have a child who obviously has some kind of behavior disorder.
Okay.
Not being a professional, I don't know what it is, but just from what is being said to me, I kind of go, gee, well, that rings a bell, that might be the problem, and oh yeah, that rings a bell, but that's the problem. And these things start adding up, and you go, boy, this must be, this sounds like a real case here. What do you do with that information?
You pass that information along to us. And then there is information that we have about children that we share freely among. There is also information that we do not share freely among the adults or the people who work in the classroom, because there are some issues that need some privacy.
Yeah, of course.
If you have concern, or you're seeing patterns that don't sound right to you, or mention it to the adult, that essentially, I guess, the teacher that belongs to that child.
Yeah.
And because we really rely on that information, you'd be surprised how often it is other folks who hear things before we do.
Mm-hmm.
But if we have it, then we know how to move with it when the time is right. And so we are really dependent on you passing that along to us. And does that answer your?
Absolutely.
Okay. Sometimes more than sometimes, often, there are adults who feel that they are saying things that are particularly maybe not the best thing to be saying about a child.
Mm-hmm.
Or I would encourage people to try hard to get over that. If you really feel that there is something questionable, either about the way that child is responding, the way that child looks, mention it to us. We do know how to be quite private and how to keep things to ourselves, and also sometimes, we'll be able to say to you, thanks for the concern, but, we know that isn't an issue or whatever it is. But try hard not to keep stuff to yourself, because it's real important that we are advocates for all the children. And we do have children in this program who are in trouble.
It's also as important that these thoughts that you have and feelings, it's very important that you air them with us.
Yes.
Not with each other.
Yeah.
There is a level of confidentiality that we all must respect, even though we are very open and free in here. This is just something that we have to do. And if you have thoughts, feelings, suspects, whatever, please share them only with us.
I don't think there's anybody here who doesn't have a child with some kind of problem that they don't necessarily hear about. And if somebody else hears about it,
Right.
they'd probably like to know. Because I ask my children, what did you do at school today?
That's truly
I know.
been my experience also. Most people are very, very appreciative
Mm-hmm.
of information.
So funnel that stuff to us, and then we'll do the appropriate thing with it. And we appreciate it very, very much. Next,
And I just wanted to end with one other comment. The flip side of this is that it is also really nice to share with each other when you observe something that is quite meaningful, or charming, or, it's amazing the experiences you can have when, there are those moments in learning when the aha occurs, and a child really puts something together in their mind. And it doesn't always happen in front of me or your child doing it in front of you, and it's really nice to pass that information back and forth with each other. They're very precious things that happen in here, and sometimes we forget how meaningful it is to let each other know about it.
in fact, I'd like to suggest that maybe that's the first thing that should come Now, so often, what we hear from each other about our children is a negative kind of thing, rather than a positive. And not canceling either of them out, but it's really nice to hear that positive little thing that, you know, each
Catch
kid-
and being good.
Yeah,
Yeah, catch and
it's
be
really
good.
neat. It's really neat.
That's a good way to phrase it.
The next thing on the list is conflict resolution, which talks to some of these issues, particularly the playground, because a lot of these conflicts that these kids have come up there, and somebody will come running to you and say, "Oh, so-and-so's over here crying, come and help." And you go over and they say, "Well, so-and-so tripped me on purpose. I know they did it on purpose and I hurt." There's a technique that we use in the classroom for this kind of problem solving that generally seems to work fairly well. And I'll just sort of go through the pattern. And both Sandy and I think Molly does this also, and that so that you are welcome to, one, listen to us do it, to have us role play it for you at other times, because I don't know if you'll catch it all at once or not, but I'll be two people at the same time. There's two children who have had an argument. One's crying, and he was tripped, he thinks, by the other person. And I get both children, all parties together, and generally I like to sit somewhere where we can be like this, and also where I can get my arms out to the kids. And the first thing that I do if I've got crying children is say, we're gonna wait until everybody is calm enough so that we can talk. And each person is going to get a turn to tell their side of the story. And then, when they're calm enough, and I check this out, can you talk now? Can you listen now? Can you talk now? Can you listen now? And they're generally going like this, and they're ready. And then I'll say, it's your turn to talk, and the rule is you may not interrupt him. You have to listen and wait until the end. While you are listening, think about, is this what you think happened? And if you have more to say afterwards. And so then we listen to the story, one person's story, with all the blames or no blames, whatever happens. Whatever comes out is what we listen to. Then I say, it's your turn. Do you agree? Did it happen differently? Do you see it as happening differently? And sometimes they just agree. Yeah, that's what happened. I did that. Yeah, that, you know. Oh, great. Then there are times where they say, no, that didn't happen at all. And you get an entirely different story, with maybe that this child happened to put their foot out just a little inch to trip that person, but it wasn't on purpose. It was because they wanted to look down and see the hole in their shoe, or, whatever. The goal is to get some kind of agreement between the story. That's one.
If you can get to agreement.
Right. It's also perfectly okay to not have agreement, but to acknowledge that you don't agree. We work through listening to the stories. You said that you didn't trip him, but he says he did. What do you think happened? Oh, I don't know. Well, maybe I did stick my foot out there. If at the end of the stories, the purpose is not to get people necessarily into trouble. The goal of this for me when I'm doing this is to have children come to some sort of resolution about this, to have their feelings taken care of, and to be able to ask that person or say to that person what it is they want from them. I don't want you to hit me. I don't want you to push me down. I don't want you to trip me anymore. And then when they make their statement of what it is that they want, I ask the other person, do you agree to that? Is that okay? Are you going to honor what he says? Most kids generally say yes. There are children who say no, And then we go from there. But when they say yes, then we go the other way. What is it that you want from this person? And they say it. And are you agreeable? Yes. Now, how do you feel? The end of it is, how do you feel now? At the beginning, we looked at each other and said, this child is very upset. Are your feelings hurt? Where do you hurt? Same with this child. Very often at the end, they say, oh, I feel fine. I've said what I have to say. I'm not as angry, and I can live with what's happening. Sometimes they'll say, I'm still angry. What can we do? Is there anything you need from us? No, I just want to be left alone. What's going to happen then? Well, I'll probably just get over it, and I'll let go of it and feel better. Are you still really angry with him, or are your feelings really hurting? It can be either. But the acknowledgement of feelings is just so important at this point. And whatever feeling they have is fine. We can't deny other people's feelings. Those are just very major points.
One important little part of that also is that you will definitely encounter the child for whom blame fixing is absolutely imperative. They cannot leave a situation unless somebody is to blame. And even though I tell John 1,000 times that I did not trip in deliberately, forget it. As far as John is concerned, that trip was deliberate, and that is that. And I'm asking him not to trip me anymore. And John is continually saying, I didn't. Stop the conversation and say that obviously we each have our own opinions, and what Sandy is asking for is the future. Are you willing not to trip her from this point on? Because it's real important that you force the acknowledgement of what's being asked in the future. And there are children who are just so stuck in that blame cycle they can't get out of it. So if you just try to remember that, okay, we have a difference here. This is not resolved, but she is asking for the future. And then if you have the one who says, no, I won't go along with that, that's probably the point at which you need to get one of us.
Right. We'll deal with it.
And, that generally someone who gets into that posture, and that isn't often, but it does happen, there's a need for a timeout. That person needs some time to collect themselves.
One of the rules also is children have to feel safe here. They have to feel safe amongst each other. If somebody is in a position where they're not letting go of this and they're going to say they're going to be hurting people, then I say, I'm sorry, you cannot be around here if you're going to be hurting people. You need to be over here. It's generally some in the nurse's room kind of thing. And when you feel like you're a safe person again, then you are absolutely welcome back in the classroom. The other thing that I do in some situations, if it's appropriate, is I say to the two of them, look, both of you got into a yucky situation. You both have hurt feelings, and now you're feeling better. What is it that what can you do next time so that this doesn't happen? Very often, they'll come up with wonderful, wonderful suggestions. This is also the kind of thing that I like to bring back to my group meetings to have the other kids talk about. What can we all do? What can you do? If you get into this situation, how can you avoid it? What are your choices? Do you want to avoid it? Maybe that you don't. But I want the kids to know what their choices are and to know that they do have choices. And someday they'll be able to stop and think. Okay.
Any comments or questions?
Yeah.
I have one question.
Yeah.
I guess I'm envisioning a situation where I would use this strategy where it's sort of a subtle conflict in the sense that what one person did wasn't entirely clear. In other words, there was something going on each side. But if I saw one child clobber another out in the playground, just haul off and slug him, I don't think I would sit them down. I think I would just say to that child, you have to stop that. I mean, I don't know what kind of dialogue is
You honestly cannot sit down for this dialogue every single time you
Right.
see somebody hurting or invading somebody else's territory. And yeah, that's
It's
exactly
not
the kind of
please don't
judgment
stop.
call that you make. You know, if
Right.
somebody clobbers somebody and away they go, and this person kind of is on their way, well, you know, you go get that person and you let them know in no uncertain terms that that's not
Out.
okay. And for instance, rock throwing is not simply that's not okay. Rock throwing, you bring them directly to us.
Sticks,
Um,
same thing.
yeah. Stick swinging.
So it's,
Karate kicks are on the move, and so we need to stop it real fast. If karate moves, bring them to us as well.
No karate moves.
so it's usually a situation where maybe one of the two comes to you and says, blah, blah, did this to me, and is crying.
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
That's the kind, yeah, basically speaking, or when they go after each other.
John?
Suppose you meet like total resistance on one side. You know, I don't have to do that. I don't have to listen to you. You say, well, yeah, well, how about this, you know? And you say, well, oh, geez, you know, you think you work through the whole thing and you just get total deadpan. I don't have to do that. Well, you're nothing to me.
You're not my
And,
teacher.
you know, I don't, you know, what's my trump card outside?
You
but-
do have to listen to me. I am the adult, you are the child.
Yeah.
And you need
then
to
they
say that.
No, I don't.
And you say, well, let's go talk to Sandy
Yeah.
and find
Or
out what
Judy,
she
or
thinks
Molly.
about the matter.
No, I don't. Okay, I'll bring them out here.
Yeah, right,
But,
exactly.
you know, you have to feel empowered. You are the adults here. And there's it is flat out that any adult who works with a child, that child listens. I mean, according to Larry, those kids who don't do that, they can be off the playground. I mean, you need to
Yeah,
make
but I can't
yourself.
send anybody off the playground.
Oh, yes,
Oh, yes, you can.
Anytime you want.
Absolutely. In the building now. Move it.
Think of yourself as an assistant teacher.
No, as a teacher.
All right.
You are a teacher.
All right.
Yeah.
If you sent me off the playground, I'd go.
See, John?
Yeah, you're
All right. And, you know, we do understand.
It's hard.
I
Yeah, it's
have
a
a
tough
couple.
situation.
It is tough, and I have
You
a
know, I don't
couple
wanna
who
drag it,
just
but
have
you
something
can
to
scream it.
confront every time they do it, and
I just want to add, I can understand what John's saying too. If the kids are going to test that, then we really do need to back up John or any
Absolutely,
other.
yes.
And this happens with substitute teachers. Sometimes
Yes.
the real teacher has to say to the kids the next day, it's not okay with me for you to give the substitute teacher a hard time. And it's the same with anybody. So you need to know that we're willing to say that to the kids just as well, so that they get the message if they're not already getting it.
What's the situation on the playground if you have that kind of interaction and it's not a child from the ultimate classroom?
Same
It's the
thing.
same kind of thing, and
We're probably in a
it's
better
the same
position to
kind
go
of
through
thing.
it.
If that child flat out refuses, what I would really suggest probably would be the wisest thing to do is to turn and walk away from the child, go directly in and get the child's teacher. You know, and because they do deal with their stuff a little bit differently than we do. And rather than immediately go through the wrap that we went through, I think I'd probably turn it over to them quicker.
Well, I have a couple of questions. One is, if you're going to send a child off the playground, where do you send them? How do you do that?
Into the classroom.
Just tell them to go back into the classroom.
What if
And
there's
then-
nobody here though?
You can just tell them to sit. Just tell them to sit and stay there for 5 minutes and
The idea
see
is
if you
to
can calm down and,
move them and calm them
Yeah.
down.
yeah, make
One
them
of the,
pay attention to what is going on instead of what their program is.
Yeah, one of the ways to do it is to say, you know, if you're sending Sandy off the playground, tell me why you're doing it, and then say, Sandy, I want you to go to your meeting area, and that's where I want you to stay. And you can use any of the materials that are in the meeting area, but that's where I want you. And then you need to communicate to us so that we know what's happened. And sometimes you need to make sure that they got there. You know, you need to look in the door and make sure, and you can generally tell which ones you're going to have to follow through, because some kids don't believe that this is happening to them. It's out of sight, out of mind, and we have a lot of out of sight, out of
Yeah.
mind stuff that goes on in here because, you know, we are very far away from each other, and that things are shifting continually, so it's also okay to have kids
I said to you, I want you to go to Judy's meeting with us, and I want you to stay there. Where is it that I have asked you to go? And have them repeat it back. They get their own ears going, they do a better job of following through. It can't quite hide as well. Most kids will do that.
And if you have encountered the absolutely out of control situation where tempers are totally shot, they are off the wall, don't send them to the classroom, walk them to the office. And let them know as calmly as possible what's happening. And that you are taking them in there because you feel that you need to go get someone and you need to talk about it, and that the classroom is not an okay place for them to be.
Is this the office over?
Where Jane
Jane
is.
is.
You know where Jane, the secretary, is?
Is it the other end of this building?
Right there.
No, it's in the next building over there, where the secretary is.
Across from the bathrooms?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the
I'm
one.
just confused.
It's
by that.
really important that you're telling the child what's happening and why you're doing this. Because sometimes they're so lost and gone, so into their own thing or out of control, that it takes several times to get it through. And they may not get it, but and it's also important that you stay calm and do this. And sort of matter of fact, this is what we're doing. I'm taking you in because you're feeling out of control to me, and I need some help, and we need to talk about this, so we're going into the office. And you're repeating it a couple of times.
And if they run away from you, let them go.
Don't chase them.
chase them. Just come and find one of us, and then we'll take over from that point.
Also, if you're concerned, I can't think of anybody well, I guess one in 20 years has run off. And we've had some
Literally left.
down the road, yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh, we've had, there's been more than one incident of that, but not much.
No, older kids
Not
usually.
much.
It's also, the little kids generally, little kids don't,
They don't
No.
get that far.
little kids, they stay close. You know, it's really interesting. It's like kids don't get lost on field trips. You know, those kids who get lost at home all the time or wander or whatever, those are the kids that are glued to you on a field trip. You know, it's really rather interesting.
I had a daughter in 6th grade who left school. Hitchhiking. I was home with 2 babies, and the secretary calls me. She says, "Is Andrea there?" I said, "What do you mean, is Andrea here?" "She's there." "No, she isn't. She took off." And she drove. She says, "Well, I'll start out and see if I can find her." So she drove all the way home. She says, "I didn't see her on the road." And I was just in tears.
it's
So I
so
couldn't
scary.
leave the 2 babies. I didn't know what to do. She finally comes sauntering in. She hitched a ride.
Oh, wow. The urge to kill.
God love through this dear.
That was very good. Well done. Oh, my.
Limit setting is such a hard thing. It's probably one of the hardest things that we confront as parents, and it's
In our
hard in the
lives.
classroom, it's hard in our lives, period. And all of us together are in all sorts of different places with limit setting with children. And there are children among us here who are experts at testing the limits, absolute experts. And there are parents among us who are pitifully poor at setting limits. And so we do cross paths occasionally. I don't know where I'm going with that. I just kind of wanted to say, that we're all in different places.
I guess the
And we
thing
need to
about
help each other.
Exactly. Because we are in different places, and you'll find yourself, I know I find myself in different places with different children.
Oh,
And so that we need to help each other. And that's okay, because it helps all of us grow and get better at it. And it's really important that we all get better at it. For the kids. Yeah.
Sorry, I just, well, one of the things I find is, I grew up in, I was gonna say your standard way, actually worse than your standard way, but.
Your substandard manner?
Substandard A or B.
The worst of the 50s, but anyway, so what what tends, you know, you play back your patterns.
Yes, you
You
do.
tend to play back what your parents did. And, you know, I spent my daughter's life trying to learn new ways.
Oh, yes.
And I, you know, very often hit a point where it's like, well, I don't want to do what my mother did.
What do I do? Yeah, what do I, oh, I know that one, yeah, I understand. Ask. You know, any of us, all of us love the topic, because that's the biggie for everybody. And we all have a variety of ideas, and things that we would be delighted to share. We can give you probably 10 ways, and you try them out and find out what works best for you. But generally speaking, I think that a lot of the stuff that we can suggest are relatively healthy ways. You know, and there are different ways.
And different things work with different
Yes,
children. That's
exactly.
another thing that, you know, the combinations are infinite in terms of.
I was having a little trouble after school on Fridays when I had to escort the kids over to Zoila's. And I was trying to be a nice open parent about it and let them go, and I would walk behind them, and it wasn't working. They were running ahead and going out into the river and all this stuff, so I started making them line up behind me. So I ducks in a row. So this Friday, they all clapped behind me all day.
They love that. Yeah. When I hike with the kids, there's an adult in the front, adult in the middle, and an adult in the back, and anybody who goes in front of the person in the front goes back.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you have, it's safe.
I tried not setting limits
Yes.
and seeing what worked and it didn't.
They need to have,
Yeah.
you know, you'll
Never
know
works.
when they need the limits. Oh, very definitely.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
The situation on the playground today and all around here was, I don't know, it was a kind of a wild day. And there were these boys playing in a tube, and they kept hurting
Under
each
the
other.
structure?
Yeah.
Oh, the green one?
Yeah, and they kept hurting each other over and over, and we kept being called over there, me and Nancy, to deal with it, you know. And the thing is, like, one of them would say, you did this, and the other one would go, I did not. And it's like, I couldn't even.
You need to remove them from that situation. First of all, they are struggling to maintain their power at that point. And so the first move is get them out of the tube,
Depower.
and move them off somewhere else.
I
And
tried
it-
to do that, and the one that I tried to remove, who was crying and saying somebody had hurt him, went running back. The same guy.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
I was like.
Punishment.
I said, Dad, you should just wear a sign that says "kick me."
He doesn't need a sign.
Yeah. When you've done what you feel that you can do, then you need to get one of us.
Yeah, I think maybe
Yeah.
I should have got.
You know, don't hesitate, but, you know, give it
Well,
a, give
actually,
it,
what happened was she came out and said, I needed one person for music. I said, this one, take this one.
And you know something, your comment about it being wild is interesting, because one of the things that I've heard Joan say a million times in conferences, and I know that it's true, if you do not pay attention to that child who's shrieking, kick me, kick me, kick me, if you don't pay attention to it and intervene, he or she will up the ante.
That's right.
And it will no longer be kick me, it will be walk all over me. And if you don't do it, he'll get under your feet, or she'll get under your feet, so that you can't miss it.
Child
They
is saying,
will
"Help
never
me."
stop. The ante goes up all the time.
They don't know how to stop.
And that's the important part about the limit setting, is to get in there and give them some assistance, help them to understand how to be somewhat powerful.
De-escalating is the first step.
I mean, you can't do any of the other
Right,
stuff.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then you gotta, work through some of that stuff. Yeah, it's hard. Oh, yes.
Also, I think the kids are well aware that we're fish out of water right now.
Oh, yeah.
And that
Oh, yeah.
in a couple months from now, when we have better skills and we know the kids' names and they're used to seeing us, things will naturally work more smoothly also.
But they'll find new tricks too.
Yeah.
They're so clever.
You know, it's amazing. I mean, I have one child in my group who is not new to my group by any means, We have been very successful with each other, and he is being very, very challenging at this point. There are certain things that he does every single day to get my attention and to get, to be in control. And he and I are in a real power struggle with each other at certain times. It's the way it goes, and that's what we're dealing with, and I'm gonna win.
I was gonna say,
The other thing that goes into this is, as Sandy's saying, is that as children change developmentally, their techniques change. As they get a little older, they're going to try out a different kind of thing. There are times between 5 and 7 or so that you have a pretty calm little kid. And my daughter was saying the other day, she said, what am I going to do with this kid? He's driving me crazy. It's my grandson, right? He's 6. And so he's the, do you remember what your kids were like when they were 4? Volatile, the extremes? Well, 6s can be very much the same way. And also out to get you. Their skills have gotten a lot better. And so you will be feeling these extremes also. And you'll notice the switches that kids make. And when they switch into a new kind of behavior pattern or another developmental level, their sort of testiness changes also. And you have to develop sort of a new technique or a new way of looking at this. It really does help sometimes to look at some of the child development books like the Gazelle series, and I think we have some of those on the
do you
parent
guys know
shelf
about,
also.
do you know about the parent library? Has anybody mentioned that?
Parent library, right around the corner here. Dennis, put your right hand
I just
straight.
realized I
Good,
haven't
Molly,
even
great.
mentioned These are books that were
can check out.
donated or bought by Open Classroom for the use of Open Classroom parents, and there's a file box, and you just fill in your name on the card for the book that you want to take out. And there's tapes there with alumni talking about how they feel now that they're in college or whatever. There's a lot of interesting stuff over there.
And I have a wonderfully interesting article on play being children's behavior, work, pardon me,
Oh, I didn't know
which
that.
has one
Hanging
copy
over
left up that I
No, I think I'll
faithfully
get the
hang up
list
every time it
there.
falls down.
Right. Put it in the newsletter.
And if you have articles on dealing with children, life in general that you think are really valuable, or books that you have that have been particularly meaningful to you that you would like to share with others and you're willing, it's also perfectly okay for anyone to put books up there, stuff for us all to share.
Or if you don't want to give them away, you could give suggestions, to the steering committee and allow them to buy them and put them up there. And there are a lot of good books out there now, just a lot of them. Okay, it's time for us to move into language arts techniques. I guess as we're going into this, I'd like to sort of preface it with, we used to talk about reading, writing, spelling, all these departments make up language arts. And for years, I guess it's the only way I've ever taught, and Sandy, I think you used textbooks at one time in your teaching career.
Yeah, when I
Yeah.
had to in the traditional
Right.
classroom.
I've never been in that situation, so I've never used textbooks. We do have some little bits and pieces of reading series around here that we sometimes use. But our language is the whole. Try not to isolate all of it into little compartments. It feels better that way. I think my feeling is that the children feel successful. I guess that's pretty much what I wanted to say. It's a real important part of our program. The nice part about it is that when we treat language this way, it can be integrated into anything that we're doing. If our theme is science, some science project, language arts just moves right ahead with whatever the science is. Reading, writing, spelling, all of it can happen with the framework of the umbrella being science. The umbrella can be anything that we want it to be, and it moves right into it. You don't have to keep it compartmentalized, which is really nice.
I think before we start to talk about the various bits and pieces of things that we use for reading, writing, spelling, and language work, I'd like to say that all of us, although Molly and Judy and I are not used to working together as a threesome, I know that Molly is also in this philosophical realm, I believe as well. We look upon language work not as something, I want to make sure I say this right now. It's a very important part of what you do at school, but it isn't the end-all be-all of what you do at school. It's one of the things that we do at school, and we expect that everyone will be successful with it. And we try very hard to foster that idea. People have a myriad of ways of learning. I have a couple of children in my group that have entered reading. They taught themselves how to read. For whatever the reason, they figured it out. I have other children in my group that are at the older end of the line, and they're still struggling. The written word is really hard for them to get a hold of. And then there are all those in between. We try really hard to foster the idea that whatever kinds of skills you have, that's where you are. And that's okay by us as long as you are working on making some progress. And it doesn't matter to us if the progress is a thimbleful or if the progress is a cupful. It will come to you. Learning does not happen in these wonderful little even measured moves. You know, it comes in fell swoops. And there will be a 2-week period where you will just be shocked at what all of a sudden they are absorbing. And there may be 2 months that follow it where they just kind of level out with what they've absorbed. And we try really hard to foster with the children that all of this is okay. And that seems to probably be one of the biggest differences with the way that we operate this elementary school. Children are not compared to the group. In other words, I don't say, gee whiz, you get an A+. You're wonderful at reading, you know, and John, you've got a C. You know, I'm a little more straightforward about it. This is really great. You know, you're reading really well, Liz, and what do you need to be working on? You know, maybe reading isn't the whole thing you need to be working on. And we try to be straightforward about it. We try to be accepting for wherever people are at. And I just want you to remember as we talk about these things that this attitude sits on top of it.
And the statement that goes along exactly with what Sandy is saying, and it's also okay that you're not reading words right now.
Right.
That will come. It comes to everybody. You are reading pictures now, and that's absolutely fine. There's no problem with that. We want the kids to feel that reading pictures is as important as reading words. You will do that, just like everybody else does that, somewhere along the path. And the other thing that goes along with it that I just wanted to say before we go on is reading is only a tool. What we're after is comprehension. We read for information to get other people's ideas. That's what we do with it. It doesn't have to be, you know, every child does not have to have every single technique of decoding words and all these other things that people do with, you know, to learn to read. Whatever way works for a particular child is the best for that child.
I sure can.
I'm going to briefly tell you what happened to my son so that if anything like this happens to you along the way, you will know it's not unusual. Last year, at the end of the year, Sandy started talking to Ken and me about Daniel and that he didn't really seem to be that interested in learning to read, and maybe writing was not quite coming along. And I don't really pay attention to whether a kid is where they're supposed to be, but I did start paying attention to Daniel to see what was going on for myself. We spent the whole summer, Daniel and I, on and off. I was the one with him most of the time, so I was the one talking to him about what was going on. And over the summer, I concluded that he had really withdrawn. And that kindergarten, he withdrew over the summer because kindergarten was very stressful. And I worried a little bit about the fact that he was withdrawn, but then one of the older parents said, you know, I've seen my kids do that, but usually it's just before they take a big step forward. So toward the end of the summer, I said to Daniel, what do you want to do? And he said, well, they didn't really want to start right away in first, that maybe he could be pre-first. And I said, fine, no problem. And he said, and Sandy had suggested that notion to us, and it was our way, it's just a label, it was our way of talking about not worrying about being exactly where everybody in your age group is. And he said, well, how long do you think that will last? And I said, well, it could last a year, but you can start doing that stuff whenever you're ready. Bingo. He relaxed, and he came to school. He was much more comfortable this year than he was last year, partially because he's older, but also because the pressure was off of him, and he knew it. Everybody had made it clear to him. He didn't have to worry about when he did it. He'd just do it when he's ready. Right now, he wants to read. He has started reading. We don't talk about it. We don't pay attention, really. All we do is respond when he starts to do it. Bingo, he's doing it. And I think partially because the pressure was off. And that's why I came here. So that if my child wasn't ready, my child would be allowed to not be ready. So,
Did you work with him over the summer? Did you try to help him read over the summer?
oh
Or
no.
did you just leave him alone?
No, we didn't talk about any particular discipline. We just talked about how are you feeling, more feelings. I didn't even ever talk to him about, do you feel like reading, or maybe you're not ready to read. We never talked about things that he's doing or not doing. It was more of a,
Emotional stuff.
yeah, I can't repeat a conversation to tell you exactly what we said, but it
And
was more
Daniel and I had a talk. One thing you have to know about Daniel, he's a highly verbal child. So this is unusual. This is not the path that we would expect from most kids this age. He spoke to me, and before school started, and he said, how does this pre-first thing work? And I said, well, it works this way. I said, you and I decide what feels like the right kind of things to be doing, and when they don't feel like the right kinds of things, then you and I agree that you don't do them. And that was enough. That was an okay explanation. And then he said, how long does this go for? And I said, this goes as long as you and I want it to go. You know, if you feel like it's finished, well, you tell me, and if I think it's finished, I tell you. And if we agree, it's finished. And that was all he needed. You know, it was enough to...
it's amazing what a
So
small
did he go to
amount.
pre-first or not?
It's in pre-first.
Well,
This is what we've done with Daniel. He and I have made an agreement. I have not listed anything. Now, often this is in our roll call books. When kids are in pre-first, the following year they do first grade. Daniel's not on that program.
We're sort of waiting to see what he
We're
does.
just
Is he in the
See what
first
he does, how he
grade
feels
class? Is he
about
with
it.
the other first grade
Yes.
children?
Oh, yeah, see,
But
that's,
you're just
that's
telling
the
him
part
he's in
that gets to be
pre-first.
tricky. Everybody is still all mixed up. You know,
It's more like just giving him the space. That's
Yeah.
really all that it is. We have acknowledged to him that he needs that space. And we've
Right,
given
but
it to him.
he's in the first grade, but you're just saying
But
you're
we
in
have
pre-first.
pre-first grade children.
Yeah.
In the first grade.
Yes,
Yeah.
who are in this group, kindergarten, pre-first, first grade.
But that's how flexible it is, that your
We
child
have a
can
new grade.
literally be sort of in between, because that's sort of where they are. You just have to wait and see what they do next.
And it is, now it's a legal grade.
But that's great. I mean, that's what's
It
so
is
wonderful to
wonderful.
me, because I know my child isn't being pressured into doing a particular thing at a particular time.
we also have the flip side of the situation, and I do have children that I pressure, and I do have children that are on a very tight schedule, because that, basically speaking, is what they need. And I'm not going to wait until grade 6.
Is that your choice, to put them on that tight schedule?
That's my choice, and often I do it with the parents. You know, we sort of together, we determine that this is what's appropriate.
Yeah, my older daughter was like that. That's what she needed. No one was willing to provide it.
They do
My
the whole
concern-
gamut.
Yeah.
My concern is,
Yes.
I tend to think of boys for some reason more readily, but, you know, if you're offered a book or the playground, go play. Where do you guys decide, no, you need to spend some time here and you need to learn a little of this stuff?
Well, first of all, I think you think boys. I really would like to confront the boy-girl issue. Boys need to move. There is no doubt about it. And they need to move outside. They need big space to move. That is, generally speaking, a pretty safe assumption that that difference is there. That's one of the reasons that we maintain the outside being open as much as possible. That's one of the reasons that traditionally boys are labeled faster than girls in classrooms, because they are denied that access and they need it by and large. Secondly, the real work of a child is to socialize and to play.
That's what kindergarten's about, particularly.
Well, and it's my opinion that first grade, second grade, and the rest of them are all about exactly the same thing. They're, in terms of what they see, all of this other stuff is an intervention that grown-ups put in their lives. And some kids accept that intervention with ease and grace. Others do not. And they will always, you know, for whatever the reason, state their case. And their case is socialize and play, and by cracky, they're not interrupting that. Those are... Go ahead.
Take some time to watch your children play. Listen to the words. Listen to what they're playing. I use my grandson a lot for an example. I spoke to my daughter tonight and she said, oh God, Sean just came in with the wheelbarrow. What has he done? He went to the garden and he harvested. He and his friend Alex went and got their farmer's hats. They went to the garden, played farmer, and they harvested all the carrots. So he brought everything inside. This is not just play, this is learning. They've worked on this garden. This is really important. But it was play, but it's their work. Take a look at what your kids are doing. Most of the kids, at least that I see around here, are incredibly appropriate. And that their intense play, and it is intense, is wonderful work. And that's what they need to be doing. And if we start altering it, they're going to keep going back to it until they complete that. That's
It's their way of integrating what they're learning into their own world.
She wants to add to it. Yes.
That just reminds me of any time, it doesn't matter how old the kids or the adults are, whenever I use concrete materials to teach a math or a science lesson, if I don't give the concrete materials a chance to be, or the kids a chance to play with the materials, or even the adults, they're going to do it anyway. So I finally learned, you just put it out and you let them play with it till they're done playing, and then we'll go on from there. So it's just another, an analogy. Even when they're in the classroom, they've got to play with the stuff before they can.
Friday was a prime example. I brought out the Unifix cubes. And for the children who had been in the classroom before and had never used them, they immediately went to measuring their foot and from the elbow to their fingertips. The kindergartners who had not used them before, there were some who had used them before, they immediately, classic, made the train as long as they possibly could, and were so excited about it. They spent the whole morning doing it, which was absolutely what they should be doing. And to give them a project would have been absolutely insane. They couldn't do it because they've got to do what Molly was saying. They've got to explore that. When we formally start Math Their Way, that's the first thing we do is we give them all these materials, we sort of instruct on how you keep them together and that sort of thing, and then they use them. We don't give them any kind of assignments. Not until they play with that through.
And to kind of dovetail back to answer your concern, we try very hard to keep play first and foremost. However, we also interrupt it, and we also offer up other things as well. We do interrupt, and we do all these kinds of activities. Does that answer your question?
Does it help?
I think she was asking, but how do you determine when to interrupt?
Is that what you're asking?
I guess what I'm saying is, by the time the kids finish the open classroom and they're going to go into the other schools, there's going to be certain skills that they are going
Oh,
to need
yes,
to have.
they will have them.
And so I guess what I'm asking is your feeling that as they
they
develop
have 'em?
along, they'll tune into that at different points,
Mhm.
and then you start to concentrate,
Yes.
help them concentrate on it a
Yes.
little? Or clearly, it's like it wasn't happening at all.
We
I
look.
would hope we'd talk about it.
Exactly.
So like Daniel's is a
Certainly
good
will.
example.
Certainly will.
Daniel had certain things that weren't happening. So Sandy started talking to us. I mean, we didn't know it was, she just started early on saying, next year I'm thinking maybe this is going to happen. So Ken and I processed it and asked our own questions and went back and forth until we understood what she was talking about. And then we started to talk to Daniel. And it's a back and forth flow all the time. You will be amazed to discover how on top of these kids, these teachers, I mean, I was just stunned. She would know in excruciating detail about where Daniel was, almost better than me. So I mean, they know every single child, where they are, where their weaknesses are, where their strengths are. And I've seen them, well, Sandy mostly, saying to a child, no, today you're going to have to, and it's going to be whatever. And that's because she knows in the back of her head that that particular skill needs working on. So that's really what happens concretely.
Now,
Right?
in fact, 50% of that is, we're going to have parent conferences coming up. And it's always one of my goals to have most of our communicating done before we have parent conferences, because you're in here and it's ongoing. So that you're getting information all the time, so that we're getting information all the time, so that we stay current. And as we're doing that, what Sarah's talking about is what starts to happen.
Great, thanks.
Well, we need to get some practical.
We need to. We have 5 minutes to do McCracken. Well, let's start with breakthrough. Okay, this is a breakthrough.
You guys can't see, but just move around on the floor.
We've been using these since 1972, and we've tried to go away from them, well, sort of, but then we always go back to the old favorite because this is the thing that is comfortable, successful, the kids like it for a period of time, and it just sort of,
It's nice.
It's nice, it feels good.
It's calm, it's slow, it's individual. And this tool is a way of helping kids build sentences. And generally speaking, the format is real simple. We have little books that have clear paper at the top and lines at the bottom, and we ask kids to make pictures, either about a theme or anything they want to. It depends on what it is. We've done something with shoes, when we've also done something where it's just wide open and you draw whatever you want to. And when you're finished, you sit down with one of us and we ask you what you want to say. And always the children will give you one sentence, generally speaking. Rare is the instance where they suddenly speak in paragraph. And often you are really pulling from them to get it. But generally speaking, you get a sentence. And with the little guys, 5-year-olds, and some of the 6-year-olds too, we keep it very, very simple. I take all the words. I love Mom. Favorite sentence. You reach in here and you find the I, and you put the I in the rack, like so. And here's I. You want to grab them and get love, and here's Mom. Okay.
And the period.
Right. And
Notice the space.
the whole time this is going on, you use your finger or your pointer if you're doing it, and I love Mom, and then you talk about this tells you when to stop over here, and this is terrific. And by the time you have the words in the rack, you have repeated this several times. You've done left to right tracking. You also begin to notice, whether or not they're looking anywhere near what you're doing here, or otherwise. It takes a lot for a child to go from the spoken word to the word in print. That is an enormous leap. Everything we say as far as the children are concerned, they're not words. This is all one run-on. And they learn to get the run-ons, and it's a stunner for them to realize that these little things are the words that they're saying. And with the little guys, once we've gotten to this point, we simply write it for them at the bottom of their book, on the line. And then you congratulate them about what wonderful work they've done. Sometimes you ask if they want to make a second sentence. Most of the time they don't. Most of the time you don't have the time because you've got, a few children
more
to get
kids to
through.
do.
And then you put the words away. If you do this process with a slightly older child, maybe a first grader, you begin to find out whether they know where the words are. And maybe they do.
And the
They
beginning
they
sentence.
often get the I's or the thes or the periods, the and, the go, the to, those kinds of things. And you begin to tell them that the word's on the left-hand side over here. And it's in the third row. 1, 2, 3. It's somewhere in that row, and can they find it? And what sound starts the word? You need to just kind of talk and keep it very light. You get the whole thing into the rack, the sentence, and again you've done the reading with them, the over and the over.
A key to this is, and I was just thinking, it's like when kids are asking for information, one of the rules is, generally, you give them just a touch, and then you wait for another question, and then you keep giving little bits. Well, here it's the same thing. You do one little thing, and you wait till you see. You don't keep pouring stuff at them until you see what the response is. And if they're understanding it, if they're with you, and if they're handling it at all. If they are, then you can go on and give them another thing. It's a little bit at a time. You want to feel successful, and you want the child to feel successful.
You also don't want this to be too long an
Oh,
activity.
definitely not.
5 to 10 minutes is it.
That's max.
That's it for the length of time. If you have a first grader, roughly speaking, in front of you, and they're acting a whole lot like they want to do their own writing, at this time of the year, the safest bet is to write it and then to say, Lori, would you like to go and copy underneath my writing? And most of the time they'll say yes. Sometimes they'll say no. They'll go over and they'll copy underneath, and then they'll show you with great pride that they've approximated it. And you congratulate them. If toward the, later on as we go through the year, or if you work with some of the older, more established readers, you put the words in the rack and you send them off with the rack. They do all their own writing. They do the
We'll let
copying.
you know what is appropriate,
Yeah.
also, on
Yeah.
terms of that. For my children, or our children at this point, I don't have them doing any of the writing. And also, the other thing for us is that we do the writing in the book first. We're the models. You're modeling how to write it.
So if they come up with a word that's not in there, are there blanks or
Yes,
something?
we give you little cards and
I have a
scissors and a
box.
pen,
Okay.
and then you make them and you store them over here. Now
Get a toolkit.
this needs to be cleaned out, because as soon as it gets filled, it's no longer of any value because you can't see everything. So we usually eliminate most of that and then just keep adding to it. Yeah.
Are they learning to just visually recognize these words?
Yes.
Or
Yes. You don't stop to do a lot of sounding out with this method.
when do they start to learn about spelling?
Okay. Generally, we start our spelling, quite traditionally. I do that in the afternoon with my first graders.
So they're making a connection between these words and the alphabet and how they spell words?
Right.
Oh, that's fine.
It's a big leap. When we say they're making a connection, we say yes, but we're talking on a real elementary level here. In fact, why don't I
think
show
they're really
them?
making a connection yet.
Well, it depends on with
Depend on the
Right.
child.
Yeah, this is
exactly.
one of the differences, I think, often between our groups. Remember, I have kindergarten, first, and second in my group. I have the full spread operating already. I've got kids who do all their own writing, kids who are doing copying, and kids who are doing none at all. So I've already got the spread functioning, which is a little different. This is the kind of tool that we use for spelling in the afternoon, and with all of my 6-year-olds, the place that we're at right now is that we start off with 2 lines on the paper, and right now we're working on M and we're working on S. And I say a word like minute, and they repeat minute, and they have to decide if the M is at the beginning of the word or the end of the word, and they have to write it. Like so. That's their spelling. We will stay on this level for a long time. I mean, we will tediously go through all the consonants, and then very gingerly we'll move into at, with the AT and that kind of thing. But this is beginning phonics. This is the phonetic structure, and this is the spelling. I'm sorry.
We use inventive spelling in here. And this begins, inventive spelling is, you want to write, I made a rainbow. You listen to what you're saying, and you write the sounds that you know. Most of the children know I, so they can write it. Made, there's our famous M, and we've all been working very hard on M design. We can say it, feel it, and some kids can even write it. So they'll get the down. I made. Maybe, but not too many, at least in my group, would hear the D in there and get it. They may hear then the next word, or they'll just say, that's too much, and then they'll go on to, others will go on to rainbow, and they'll get the R. And some will say, well, I wonder what says R. And other children will know, and I'll help them out. That's inventive spelling. That's the works with this. And as they get more of this, what I've noticed is that their spelling just, or their writing just grows. It's wonderful. It's just wonderful. And then further down the line, and Sandy's seen more of this than I have, because I don't usually have the second graders get into whole words.
Yeah.
And they actually spell them.
I guess what I'm wondering is, reading is one of the things that you can really work with your child if they want to at home. You read them a lot of stories, and it's a place where you can spend some time learning together. And I just wonder what sort of a technique you should use.
It's a great question.
To fit within this system.
Okay. The absolute best thing that you can do with your child for reading is to read to them. And I know that it gets, tiresome often, because they will often ask you to read that same story umpty-dump times. If they are asking you to read the same simple story umpty-dump times, you're at a really important crossroad, because they are beginning to get a relationship with a printed word. Don't ever not read that story. And at the same time you're rereading the simple ones, move on to another level, which is to say a longer story, a more intricate plot. Talk to them about the story that you've read. What did you like that story, and what did you like about that story? And I didn't like it when so-and-so said such and such, or whatever it is. See if you can engage them in a conversation that will let you know how much of it they understood. If you can't engage them in that conversation, don't worry about it, they're not there. Just read. Yeah.
I guess I just want to say that reading is more than decoding,
Right, exactly.
So oral language is very much a part of comprehending what you read when you're older too. Having built a vocabulary, before you read, really decode still makes you just more able to comprehend later. And so that's just one of the really fun things about learning to read this way.
Yeah. Teaching them how to write letters or the sounds of letters, that is so far down on the scale of what really counts when it comes to learning that it's an important thing. I guess I shouldn't phrase it quite that way. It's an important thing, but there are so many other things that kids need to have so much more of than that.
Yes.
That you'll be very safe if you leave that all to us and just hang in there with reading and listening. One of the reasons that I feel so strongly about sharing and talking in group, I often have people say to me, my God, why do you do this continually? Every day talking and sharing and structuring the listening is because that's the key to really successful reading and writing. I'm so convinced of it. It's incredibly important, and children don't have a lot of opportunity where people really truly sit and listen and expect them to communicate an entire idea. Expect them to put it out there. It's not an easy task.
Listening is so major. We forget that. How to be an active listener is really hard.
Yeah,
I'm kind of confused now because Trina comes to me and she's got a genuine interest in wanting to know this. I mean, she's learned her letters and her stuff. Excuse me?
Wanting to know what?
Oh, about like the sounds. I'm sorry, I was taking out from what David.
Yes.
About the sounds that words make and making the words and reading the words and you're saying it's down here and yet for her it's up.
Okay, well, I can give you a practical suggestion. It's a child's perception of, she is fascinated by words and by speaking and about reading and about storytelling. She really is very interested in those things. Her perception is that means I learned to write. That's what that's all about. The very best thing that you can be doing with Trina, because of the kind of interest she has, is a lot of dictation at this point. Have her take those pictures that she produces umpty-dumped of and say to her, I'm ready to write down some things about your pictures, and I think you should do this. And tell me something about this picture. And if she's unwilling, say, what's this? Go to the base level.
She'll want to do it, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, take it over for her if you
Don't let her
can.
do it?
If you can, take it over for her. Tell her to tell you the sentence, you write it down. You become interested in reading what she is writing. Do what we do here. Oh, the flower is beautiful. Isn't that lovely? Look at the way those words look. That's just great. Whoop, grab the next picture. And what shall we write down about this one? And you do the writing. If she gets stuck in the writing, she is going to be going so slowly and so laboriously that the sentence and the flow is going to be gone. There will be no flow to it.
Can't get to literacy.
What about following the story? One of these stories that we have to read 500 times. What if, as we read, we point to the word? Is that useless at this point
No,
with a 6-year-old?
not at all useless. It's fine. Just don't expect them
To follow all of
Don't make the mistake of saying, you point out the word as I say it.
Yeah.
I
mean, he's got it memorized
You
too.
do it as long as you possibly can.
He's got it memorized,
That's
so
what
is
happens.
this going to help him to see what it
Memorizing
sounds like
is
or
such an
not?
important part of reading, I can't even begin to tell you. Where we got the idea that memorizing has nothing to do with reading and is cheating is sheer stupidity.
Oh, God,
Memory
you're telling
work
me.
is so important, it's unbelievable.
Because he tells Grandma that he can read this story, and I said, well, you're not really reading, you've memorized
It is reading. It is reading. It is reading.
Yes, but they didn't teach me how to read or write.
Right.
So, it's the same, he just thought, I'm
My
going
daughter
to
turned
school,
off.
I have to learn how to read and write now.
Exactly.
But I said, oh, no, you're learning other things that are just as important. But it's that same thing. He just, I'm supposed to know this.
And,
That's what I learned.
there's another way, too. If Trina really wants to write, and you've gone through your thing here, after you've got 4 or 5 pictures there and you've written a sentence, hand it over to her. Say, you can copy whatever you like, and then go away from it. Don't maintain your interest in her copying. Maintain your interest in getting the flow going.
Yeah.
That
The
she
flow
has
again being what?
lots to
I-
say
her
about
language.
lots of different things. Her language, because that's really truly the stage that she's at, is needing to make it flow and to be able to express herself and get her ideas down. And
You know what? Another thing is, don't hook this into intelligence. This has nothing to do with anybody's intelligence at all. The children with IQs that are just off the charts can't read. There's no correlation whatsoever at all. And I get all of a sudden it just flashed on me. Sometimes people are hooked into that, and I think that it's very difficult as a parent. And I'm thinking back to when my kids were little, and I had one daughter who had a disability, and And some grandparents or other people are saying, and so are you reading now, honey? You know, I want to smack them. A lot of the stuff is societal kinds of things, outside stuff put on. And you've got to help your kids and protect them and make them strong. That what they're doing is right, is good, is okay. That's what they should be doing. They're being the best 6-year-old they possibly could be, or the best 5-year-old. That's their job now. They're not supposed to be trying to be 10.
I do want to ask though, I mean, what kind of things she wants to write, you know, because I don't know.
Oh, Trina? Yeah, anything, everything. I
I
mean,
mean, does she want to write long sentences or little words?
and she
or-
writes me cards and, you know, yeah, sentences. And they all run together. It's all the sounds, you know, that she's figured out what sounds the letters make. And you have to sit there and figure it out. She makes calendars. She just, you know, it's pretty open-ended.
Yeah.
All kinds of things, not one. And why would it make a
Oh,
difference?
I guess I'm just trying to find sort of a balance between what Sandy's saying with getting bogged down with writing long things and not wanting to keep her from writing if she wants to write.
No,
you know.
turn it back to her. You know, after you
Yes.
have written it,
Uh-huh.
turn it back to her.
So she's practicing the language part.
Yeah.
And then she'll write.
Uh-huh. Well, I'm not pushing her.
Yeah.
She's bringing it to me.
Well, write it out for her and tell her that, you know, if she's interested, she can do that.
She could copy it, is that what
Sure.
you're saying?
Sure.
What if
I
they
think
keep
so.
asking how to spell words? That's what Eddie's doing. He doesn't want us to write it down in the copy. He wants us to tell him, and then he'll write it down.
I'd do it.
You know, so I'm just spelling stuff all the time. Yeah. And, you know, you get your upside down, you get everything.
Oh, you're going to get the wrong
crooks.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you leave them alone, then they all revert to backwards.
Yeah.
Okay, you know,
But this is
it's
the way
it
he
is.
wants to do it, and I just went along with that. He just started doing that. And don't want to squish it.
Another variety of what you're talking about is Tom does lots of stories. And he's got a book that he writes in. He just writes and writes and writes and writes, and he turns the page.
Yes.
He'll turn the page and write and write. And sometimes I've asked him to read me his story. And he'll sit there,
Very good.
go back to the beginning, and he reads the whole thing, and I'm writing it down over here. And we can come back to that same page 2 weeks later, and he'll read me the story.
It may be in his own script.
It's
Right.
It's just
Exactly.
going along, you know. And
That's very
Are
classic.
you saying that he
So
actually,
classic.
you know, he like looks at that and
No,
identifies something?
No.
Or
It
he
reminds
has
us.
a story?
It reminds us.
He
He
is
is beginning,
Yeah,
but
that's
he's
what I
also
mean.
beginning
That's
to
it.
get
Identifies the
word
story.
in print. He's beginning to get that what people say is printed.
An absolute classic last year. It was just hysterical. Sandy Jane. Mary Crosby was here from Dominican because she has to put in so many hours. Professors who teach education have to work in a classroom so many hours, have kid contact time. So she was here. Sandy Jane was over there in that corner, and she was producing. She had pictures and pictures, and underneath she had this. She's doing this. And she's saying this as she goes. And she had this whole story. She had a whole book. She read the whole thing to Mary. And, you know, some people would say, oh, well, she's just playing at this. But the next step was, in 2 or 3 months, Sandy Jane was reading and writing. She just kept going with the process. This was one of the beginning steps. And it's an absolute classic. These are the ones, oh, it's so rare to see it, and it's so wonderful to see it. Because somehow, I don't know what it is that we do, and I did it too, I influenced my kids. Karen had some of that, Candy didn't have any of that. And it was so wonderful to be able to see that. You know, you're so lucky when you have this sort of this imitation happening. We're the models, and they're modeling, you know, they're copying us, and it's wonderful. That's the beginning steps. Special. We need to go on.
I know we do. I wanted to show you a couple examples of books that we use for teaching reading. This it looks like Spilt Milk is a very simple story. Excuse me. That starts out like this. Sometimes it looks like spilt milk, but it wasn't spilt milk. Sometimes it looked like a rabbit, but it wasn't a rabbit. And you go through the entire book, and it has bits and pieces on every page. And then the very end is sometimes it looked like spilt milk, but it wasn't spilt milk. It was just a cloud in the sky. And we make books in here, and we don't repeat exactly what this is, but we ask the children to substitute, to make up their own. And sometimes we make great big bulletin boards with it, and people put it up, and we make sentences out of it. Sometimes we put the sentences on strips. But what you end up with is, it looked like spilt milk, generally are the words that the kids are going to be reading by the time you're finished. And they get the frame. Sometimes it looked like, but it wasn't. This kind of activity involves a lot of talking and involves a lot of reading. We do all of the writing simply because we want to keep it in the fast-moving mode so that you can keep the reading going. That's one example. Henny the Penny is another example of a story that is just marvelous for doing that. It has some rhyming in it, and every page is virtually the same structure, as the one before. And after we read this a dozen times with the kids, we talk a whole lot about it, then we start reproducing our own Henny Penny book, only you make up some other kind of animal. You use the wolf. Dophy Wolfie, follows after and you make the pictures and you reproduce the story, and you have the kids you'll have each one make up a page, put it all together, and it's our class book. Then we read it and read it and read it, and this kind of repetition is flat out memory and a whole lot of language practice.
Are you connecting the word with the sight of the word? Is that what you're doing over and over and over?
Generally speaking, yes. In addition to which, you're also using a rhythm in your head, which is why when all of these things follow a structure, it's not a once upon a time.
So what does a rhythm
There's
do?
a pattern.
And what do they learn?
You remember rhythms.
You remember rhythms more easily, and also it has the same kind of structure or framework is repeated. Look at what Judy has, because this is a good example.
We were
It's
doing
repeated
color
in your
words,
head.
and this is the picture that the child drew, and the word is people are not read. And this we put together in a
We
book
read
after.
pictures first.
Yeah.
And then flip
And
over.
here we have what? A black ant is not read. This is it's a sentence frame, right? And a rock is not read. And
We're
so on
working
and so
on
forth.
color words right now.
So the kids are coming up with their own example.
Yes, and then they, somebody wrote this out. Was it you guys? No, it was,
Marcia, I think.
yeah. And then, let's see, Molly had done are read first.
Blank, or a
Something
blank is read.
Is read, or, yeah. And then we went to the not read one more, so we could use read again. And then if they're going to do individual reading, I tell them that they can use this for their reading book. It's great. It feels really good. And so eventually, we'll have lots of these hanging around. And you'll see kids sitting down reading these things. It's just wonderful to watch.
Is this McCracken?
Yes,
yes.
okay. This is all McCracken kind of stuff.
I never knew.
And once the kids really start to be at home with reading, we have what we call our reading tubs. So that not only do we have all the projects going on, but they have, quote, a reading book. And this is, each of us has a binder, and you may be asked to read with kids that are reading, and in my particular group, these happen to be the kids that are reading in books at this point. So you sit down and you open up and flip it open to that child's page, and you see what people who have read with that child have had to say. It lets you know what book they're reading and just something about their style, what they need to be concentrating on, that kind of thing. And generally the way that we do this is that I call Donna over and I tell Donna it's time for her to read with me. And she sits down, I look up in here. Most of the time Donna's able to find her reading book in here. These reading books some are phonetically organized and some are not, meaning that, for instance, in a phonetic organization, This book is called Nat the Rat, and I can guarantee you that every A in here says Nat. So when I sit down, that's what I generally start with, because this is what we're working on in this book is And, you know, it's one of our simpler books. And we go through it and we read it. And, you know, this is pretty straightforward, old-fashioned stuff. And we have the kids read with a grown-up 2-3 times a week, so that they have their own time reading out loud. And some kids like to read 2 or 3 pages, others like to read whole entire books. And you have to gauge your time accordingly. You know, if there isn't much going on, and then you can let Nora read a whole book every time she sits down with you. If you have a lot of children to read with, well, you can't. You have to say you have to stop now. And it never really is okay to read only 1 page. Yeah.
Are you reading to them, or are they reading?
Well, they're reading to you. This is the
graders?
shift over. Some are first graders and some second graders, and I've got kindergartners already who are reading, so my hunch is they're probably not going to be stalled off too long before they hit the books.
I have kindergartners who are reading. My experience generally is the kindergartners are not taught to read in books. They're too busy doing other things. They read everything around the room. And I'm comfortable watching them read everything around the room or whatever's there. You know, that's great. You know, they see to know what's really best for them. I really generally trust that very much.
On the front of the binder is something called Reading with a Child, and it's one of your handouts tonight. It's a good idea to read that and get familiar with it, because there are some really nice things you can do when you read with children or have them read with you that are very meaningful. I don't need to go over them now, but each of us operates this way, you know, with our reading tub, and I know that Molly and Judy and I will ask you from time to time to read with kids, because it's one of the best things that we can get people to do. Because one-on-one reading with a grown-up is just gold. You know, it's really it's worth every minute that we spend with it. So you will frequently be asked to do that, probably.
The other reading tool that we use is called Favorite Words. Did you remember boxes? Yeah. Now Sandy has boxes that look like this, and we have checkbook boxes for the children's words. And we have also a checklist and the instructions on how you do breakthrough and, what is it, breakthrough? Yeah, favorite words.
They're just both on the same page, so I stuck it in the same.
In here, written out.
I never knew that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll make you a copy, it's in the computer.
Oh, do. And then I could.
Yeah, okay.
We could put it in, make it part of a
Yeah.
packet.
And the idea of this, it's a technique that we found from Sylvia Ashton Warner, who worked in New Zealand with the Maori children and was tearing her hair out trying to get these kids to read. And what she found was that when you allow them to choose the word that they want to learn to be, that very often this works and it sticks. And so 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes 4 times a week in our group, the children go through get their favorite word boxes, and the pattern goes something like this. They open up their box, and if I'm doing it, I say, I want you to read your favorite words to me. I hold the words. This is the way I do it, because let's see if I can do this with Nikki's. There are a whole lot in here, but I do a story kind of thing that goes with it. And he'll hold it up, and I'll say, not stick, and so I'll say, a stick went in the child says water, and it hit a boat that was stuck on a rock. And giggle, 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 because most of the time they make no sense whatsoever. And we'll go through them. When the pile is like this, I often go through them twice. And then I say, then we'll come to a word that they don't remember. I just put it over on the side until I'm done. And then I say, And Sylvia Ashton Warner, she would say, this word is not very important to you because you didn't remember it, so let's get rid of it. It's in your way right now, so you rip it up. Most of our children want to keep their words, or I give them the choice. You want to keep this for one more day? Let's, what is this word? Or I'll tell them what the word is. And sometimes they'll say, nah, I don't want it, I didn't like it anyway, or whatever it was. So we tear it up, and then, what's your new word for the day? But by the end of the year,
Can't the kid take the cards home sometimes?
I don't allow my kids to take them home. They get big
I
stack
do
like
various
this.
sundry things with it.
I'm confused about that.
Yeah, I know. It's you catch on after a while that we have little nuanced differences between us.
I never
do not
did catch on.
Yeah, I do not have kids keep cards. If they don't know how to do it, we do a ceremonial rip up instantaneously. I don't.
You said if
My
they read them right,
preference
then you
is-
take them home.
Well, I do that from time to time.
I never do that. I keep them all. And what about you, Molly?
Yes, Molly. Well, I was just thinking about today, somebody really didn't want to throw out any words and couldn't read very many.
Oh,
of them.
really? Oh, interesting.
But he knew the words that were in the box. He could look in the air and remember them, so we kept them.
Air reading.
Well, okay, and what do you, I have a question. What do you do when they're coming up with their new words and one of them, my one dear little boy, sticks in my mind, is always
Says
doing this.
poop.
Yeah, poop, penis.
Bathroom talk.
You say we keep
Not
bathroom
okay.
humor at home. We're not going to use those kinds of words.
Cool. Penis is just a body part.
Sorry, true.
Just say it's not appropriate. Let's think of another word.
No, don't say it's not appropriate. Just say we're not going to use it
That
here.
here.
Ah, okay.
It's appropriate,
Don't
but not
engage
here
the
right now.
argument.
Yeah, don't get into it with the kid.
Yeah.
Which is so easy to do.
Okay.
Some of our kids are just so clever and they're so
Oh,
verbal.
boy.
Before you know it, you're in that battle, and you really have to stay back. They're clever.
We've gone desperately
Yes,
over
for
time.
half an hour.
And I'm sorry.
There's lots more under reading, but
Anyone
those are
like
the
to
major
ask a
parts that we
question?
use for language arts. Slowly, they start to write all different kinds of things. As we do observations of things, science books, and daily journals, and language books, and learning poems and copying things as their handwriting develops.
I guess
We're
that's
working
the
on
same one.
handwriting in the afternoon. We are.
I guess just in general, my sense is that, there are so many different ways of learning to read. And everybody has, there are learning styles for learning thinking and reading and math and all of those things. And so, part of our job is just figuring out what it is that works for each kid. And so that's why you see different approaches available. Not everybody's going to have a quantitative approach because it doesn't work for everybody.
Oh, yeah, and that's major. I think that's another thing that helps make us unique, and that we're all comfortable with that. That's really important, I think, to all of us.
And some kids will learn to read and write, so it's just